very, very happy to be here and speaking to all of you today. I'm representing Samagra. The core thesis at Samagra is better governance as a lever to create large-scale impact. While we are completely agnostic to the domain that we work in, and we work across domains such as education, health, service delivery, agriculture, skilling, employment linkages, and so on and so forth. But we've fixed our lever of change, and that is governance. And what I'm going to talk about today is it's not so much about why work with government, because I think this is an audience which kind of understands the value and the importance of doing that. What I'm going to share, based on our learnings of the last 9 years, are 5 principles of how to engage with governments. That's what I'll try to share today. I'm calling it the Panch Sutras of engaging with governments. At Samagra, we have Panch Sutras for everything, a lot of Panch Sutras. This one is around at a macro level, how does one engage with the government? There are, of course, a lot of nitty-gritties in terms of day-to-day working with the government, but I'll keep it macro for the purpose of this discussion. The first learning or the first Panch Sutra here is enter only when there's a strong pull. Right, as professionals who kind of really deeply care about impact, especially as young professionals, we get very excited when we see the possibility of impact. Right, you work in a particular state on a particular domain. There's a huge possibility of creating impact. There's so many beneficiaries and so on. But what I'm saying here is, and what we have done over the years, is not the possibility of impact that matters. It's the probability of impact. What are the chances of converting that possibility into real impact on the ground? And that's where the situation has to be set up for success. And one of the ways and one of the key ingredients of a setup for success is a strong pull from the government towards that reform, towards that transformation. And in our case, we define that strong pull as 2 things. One, there has to be a committed and driven bureaucrat who wants to do that reform, who wants to run with it, and should have a mandate at the political level. In the state, it means at the chief minister's level. So once these 2 combination is there, that's when a strong pull, we say there's a strong pull, and there's a high chances that the possibility of impact will become a reality. And how do we really measure this pull? How do you get to know? How do you assess whether the pull is there or not? And it can vary in different settings. In our case, there are 3 things. One, we generally don't make the first move. We don't go to a government and say, this is what can be done, that's what can be done. Instead, we let the government or the bureaucrat to reach out and say, this is what we want to do, can someone help with it? Right? So that itself is a demonstration of pull. Now, even once that happens, we don't kind of grab the opportunity with both hands. We'll usually kind of say, ki, nahi ho payega, right? There are many things that are required to really make it happen. It requires a certain commitment of your time. It requires certain resources, certain budgets, certain partnerships. It requires time from the chief minister. It requires 10 other things, right? Idea is almost like you're trying to scare away the person. But of course, that's not the idea. Idea is you're not wanting to scare away. You're just making it real as to what will it take to make that reform really happen. If the person still is there, still wants to do it, and still is committed to it, then that means there's a strong pull. So that's the second thing that we will do. And in our case, third, we also put the onus of figuring out funding for our own fee also on the government, right? So that's again a test of pull. So various ways in which you basically ascertain what's the level of commitment on behalf of the government to really undertake that and walk that path. And if there's that strong pull, then the setup of success is good, and that's when we enter. So that's the first learning. The second learning is to be a real thought partner to the government and speak up. Right? Now, this is easier said than done. A lot of, at least our team members are 20-year-olds, 30-year-olds. How do you really be a thought partner with a senior bureaucrat who's much more than you in terms of experience, in terms of maybe credentials, and is in a position of authority? So it's easier said than done. But the learning again has been that 2 mindsets or 2 things really help in this to be able to speak up. And again, you don't want to speak up for the sake of speaking up. You want to speak up in the interest of the impact that you want to achieve and do it thoughtfully. But 2 things help. One, the mindset of the impact being important and not the project. Right? At the back of the mind, you need to know that you're very happy to walk away from the project at any point in time. Right? So it's not the project or the program or that engagement is not important. What you're trying to achieve through that is important. And that has to be an internalized and deep thing. It cannot be for the sake of speaking. It has to be internalized. So that helps. And second, of course, you have to back up any speaking up, and with senior bureaucrats, with chief ministers and so on, with a lot of backup and a lot of kind of credibility and a lot of being on top of content. So if you know your stuff, if you know what you're talking about, you have the backup, then it becomes easier to speak up. But it's very important in the interest of being able to create that large scale impact that you're looking at, that we act as thought partners and speak up wherever needed. The third learning over the years has been to be a catalyst and avoid being hands and legs to the government. Now, the unfortunate reality is that 95% of people outside of the system who end up working with the government, a lot of times end up becoming hands and legs to the government. There's nothing wrong in that per se. Right? It's not something that's bad to do. It's just that the government already has so many hands and legs. Right? There's no way any private entity, any private setup can augment that in a meaningful way or can really have a parallel system. It doesn't make sense to do that. It will never match the scale of the government in terms of people, right? So the real value add is when you can catalyze the system such that the existing hands and legs and minds in the government, they are working more effectively, right? So that whole mindset of being a catalyst and not doing the work that the government ought to be doing is extremely important and helps. So that's the third learning. The fourth learning over here has been that it's extremely important to manage the environment. And what do I mean by managing the environment? Let's say you're working with one department with some bureaucrat. It's important to keep the leadership of the associated departments also aligned. It's important to keep the boss of that bureaucrat aligned. It's important to keep the chief minister's office aligned. Keep the chief minister on your side, right? Bunch of partners that might be working. Managing all of that becomes extremely, extremely important because that provides that air cover under which a lot of reform, a lot of transformation can really happen, a lot of meaningful work can happen. Otherwise, things will keep coming, which will keep disturbing the stuff that you're trying to achieve. Now, the question is, how do you manage the environment? Various things. Again, some examples. So sometimes it could be the packaging of the work that you're doing. The actual work is what it is, but how do you position it, package it, such that it becomes important for other stakeholders as well? Right? Sometimes it could be just having quick and frequent kind of launches. Nobody has the patience in the government to say, okay, 3 years and some grand system would come and something would change. No, the thumb rule we follow at Samagra is a launch every 6 months. Right? So every 6 months you keep on launching. That keeps the political leadership at least kind of aligned to a large extent. Share a lot of credit. Don't take credit. Share credit. So all of these are ways in terms of ways to kind of manage the environment. Very important to do that. The last and the fifth learning, I would say, think of sustainability and think it early. Right? The real test of the impact that one is able to create through government is once you've moved out after 2 years, after 3 years, after 5 years, whatever the duration might be. After moving out and you take 3 years from then, how many of the things that happened are still sustaining? That's the real test of impact. And getting things to become sustainable is never easy. So it's important to think about it early in the journey and not say that let's do everything and in the last 6 months when we're moving out, let's think about sustainability. Some doesn't work. Right? Obviously, you may want to in the beginning demonstrate a lot of things and may not be from day one that there is sustainability. Or fairly early in the journey, sustainability and the thinking around that has to come in. So these are the Panch Sutras in some sense, basis our learning over the years, or the last 9 years of engaging with governments. So entering only when there's a strong pull, which means that it's set up for success. That means the probability of converting the possibility of impact into reality is high. Second, be a real thought partner to the leadership on the government side. Speak up when required, and this requires a mindset of the impact being more important than that engagement, and a lot of credibility in terms of content. Third, be a catalyst. Avoid being hands and legs. One cannot kind of really augment the government bandwidth or the government, the people in the government. It's about getting them to work more effectively, and that's why playing the role of a catalyst is very important. Fourth, manage the environment. It'll provide the air cover to kind of really push through a lot of reforms. Otherwise, disturbances will keep happening. And fifth, think sustainability and think about it early. So with that, I'll just stop here and happy to take any questions around working with the governments. Thank you.